this topic I want to talk about regarding Ange as well. We've seen him kind of snap back at fans a couple of times now. Obviously, at the weekend we saw it. We saw him at Bournemouth a few months ago. We saw it at Leicester when at White Hart Lane when people were berating him from above the dugout. He kind of came back out and said a few words.
A couple of City as well last year.
Yeah, City last year. So it's happened a few times. I mean, Jim, I want to ask you first. I mean, what do you make out of that? And do you feel like it is happening a bit more regularly now? And also, you're looking at the embargoed press conference last week. I think it was before this game. I think it was before the Fulham game.
It was, yeah.
Where he was, snapping back at kind of Mr. Hindsight and kind of people that keep doubting him. What do you put that all down to, Jim? And do you feel like he is cracking a bit under the pressure?
Well, there's two kind of elements. This one is the arguments with the fans, and one is biting back in the press, because I have different opinions on those two things. I think being a bit bitey in a press conference, I've seen us have plenty of managers who do that. That's a bit like in a relationship in real life, right? It's not an issue when your other half gets angry at you, because that typically means they still care about you. That's why you've annoyed them so much. The issue is when you come home and do something annoying and they just don't care anymore, because it's typically because you've lost interest in each other. You don't care anymore. And I put that a bit like in the press conferences. Ange does care for his job. He's getting frustrated. He's getting anxious. The emotions are coming up because he wants us to work and it's not working. It's as simple as that. And a lot of us fans who are defensive of him, we feel the same. We want it to work for you so much. Please, come on, Ange, find the magic answer. And it's just not. It's not turning that corner for us, and that's quite understandable. Why Danny, your opinion is that he's not the right man. And look, I can't tell Danny he's wrong when we're 14th. I can't tell someone like that they're not wrong. But I have an emotional connection to this project, and I want it to work out. And I did a lot of research on the history of the man, and I just I think what winds him up, he's projected as an idiot who doesn't know sports science, and he doesn't know tactics, and he doesn't know all these things, and he can't see Pedro Porro in miles of space at the back post, when he is an extremely qualified professional, and he is extremely qualified in sports science. And we interviewed Anton McElhone, who worked for him, ABB, Poch, and Redknapp, all four, and he's head of sports science for Ange, and he was a head fitness coach for Poch as well. And he was explaining, like, Poch and Ange are the two that were really, really qualified in terms of coaching and sports science. Those two knew their stuff. He was saying, of course, I said, does Ange see players exposed at the back post? He said, of course he does. He 100% sees all this stuff, and he wants to fix it. And often as a coach, it's very frustrating. You go on the training pitch, and for the life of you try and instruct players to do things differently that are ingrained in them for their whole careers, and they just can't get their heads around it. And people will say, well, then you've got to change the system because it's not working with those players. But Ange is saying, I want this to work, and it will work if I get the right players in to do it. And we're in this chicken and egg bit. But I think where he's defensive is he's being belittled to a point of like he's just an absolute moron and we all know better than him. And it doesn't mean that we're all wrong and those fans saying he's wrong are wrong. But I think the level of you're an idiot, you don't know anything about coaching or tactics is what's irking him, because he is an A-licensed qualified coach who, even if you can get to manage in the A-League, you are at a professional club, you are a stupendously good coach. Does that mean Ange, but then we're comparing Ange to Premier League coaches, right? So that doesn't mean he's necessarily good enough for the Premier League, because you're comparing against other Premier League coaches, not against other football fans. But I think that's irked him. In terms of the fan one, I do think the best policy is to keep your head down in those situations and not bite back. But equally, I do find it that was a premeditated attack, in the sense that they're filming and then they go in on the attack in terms of calling him names. And then if you saw Ali Gold's article today, that video cut out most of the abuse Ange got before that moment that led him to snap. So someone got the camera out and they deliberately tried to get a reaction so they could get it on camera, and then cut out the bits where they were saying certain things. And you can see it on Ali Gold's Twitter page now. And I just find it a bit sad in a way that an opposition fan ended up, who was as well, was calling our manager an effing see you next Tuesday. And our manager turned around and said, be respectful. That was
I don't
responsible
think
for
I
a
don't
young
think
man.
it was I don't think it was seen exclusive because I watched the whole video. He was saying the guy was saying something else. He didn't call him a
Well,
CUNT,
A-
but
Ali Gold's put a thing out to say that they cut bits out of that video.
no. I've seen
Yeah.
the extended video as well.
Oh, okay.
There's an extended video. He doesn't use the word CUNT in it.
Okay.
He says the F word and some other things, but he doesn't
Okay.
actually
But
say
he calls
that.
him a. I won't swear on
Yeah,
it.
but
It's,
do you know,
it's something. But
yeah.
just to finish it off, the point is, Ange turned around and says, and I agree, the best policy is just keep your head down and don't get involved with this stuff. But he turned around and says, be respectful, you're a young man. That's his response. But we're now defending the stance almost of an opposition fan because a week ago Ange says this stuff doesn't bother me and then he snapped back. But football for me, I love Spurs purely based on tribalism. Like, I adore this club based on nothing but emotion, and I will defend it to the hill, and I will never not be a Spurs fan. I will never acknowledge another club as better than Tottenham. I will love Tottenham to the end. And for me, that stretches through to our manager as well. And I just find it strange when that tribalism is lost and detached, and then we start almost kind of saying, yeah, you know what, our manager is wrong. I don't care if he's technically wrong, Ange, in that situation. He should have kept his head down. He's a manager of Tottenham Hotspur. And to me, the guy who went out of his way to try and get a reaction out of him and wind him up is an a-hole, and I don't like that person.
Jim,
Well,
that's called delusion.
Yeah,
It is. It's stupid and delusional.
but the thing is, I'm going to flip that switch. I'm going to flip it to the other side, just to play devil's advocate, right? Because the thing is, you got to look at the fans like Ben and Sim, and like many other fans that we know, and probably yourself as well, Jim, that go to all games, home and away. They follow Spurs everywhere they go, and when you like, for example, right, when Sim went to Amsterdam, right, to watch that game, I mean, it costs a lot of money for people. You have to get a hotel, you have to have flight tickets, all the rest of the cost is going to cost you. Time off work. And then when you go and see a team put in a performance like that, it is so disheartening, and it's so hard for a fan when you've been seeing time after time after time just dross performances, no energy, no passion, not even fight or desire. It just puts you in that headspace of, why am I even giving all my energy to support the team, right, when they're not even doing the bare minimum, when they're highly paid athletes and they should have some sort of honor or pride to give something back to these fans that are actually taking a lot of time and money to go and watch them home and away. And this is where it flips, where those fans are starting to become so frustrated with it. I wasn't Ange out until recently, to be honest. I was like, I don't really mind what happens, right? Because I don't mind if a new manager comes in. I don't mind what happens if he stays or not. But for me, it's just where it went wrong is where, for me, it was that moment after the Ipswich game when you're going into that Man City game, and I said to Ben after the game, because we went to the game, I was like, if I know he's going to not play Spence, but to take Spence out of the team when he was at this moment was your best performing player, I think is criminal, absolutely criminal. And he did, right? And then against Man City, where did the goal come from? The right-hand side, where Porro was playing, where Spence should have been playing in that game. And it's these kind of things that you can't understand the logic in some of the decisions he makes, especially in game as well. And it's just frustrating as a fan. And I think fans are just getting fed up with it, because we're just not seeing an improvement. Like, it's nearly 2 years into this project. He's had 4 windows, and there's a lot of people, including myself, I would argue some of the players we brought in are nowhere near the level we should be getting, to be honest, right? I mean, I didn't want Brennan Johnson in this club because I didn't think he's good enough. Solanke, he's okay, but 65 million for a player who's not really scoring goals. I don't care about he works hard. A lot of players can work hard. Soldado worked hard, right? Doesn't mean he was a good player for Spurs, right? And this is the kind of thing, like, we need to assess them for what their ability and what they're actually giving the team. Yes, they might link players or whatever it is, but the problem is, for example, Solanke's been brought in as a goal scorer. He should be scoring goals, and he's not even got 10 goals yet this season. And it's go on, Ben.
No, but Danny, I just want to bring it back to the point of Ange potentially cracking under pressure with the way he's snapping back, because for me, I don't condone any fan giving Ange abuse. Obviously not. I think it's horrible, and it's not something he should be going through. But he's not. At the end of the day, right? This is football culture. This is what happens.
This is football, yeah. Exactly that.
Many managers before him would have suffered abuse. Many managers after him are going to be suffering
You
abuse.
just ignore it. He's a better man.
Yeah, and I think snapping back the way he has been doing recently is signs of a manager that is becoming increasingly
100%.
under pressure.
And do you know what that does, Ben? That also puts less confidence with the fan base, right? And even the players in the squad, because when the players are seeing that, the staff are seeing that, the owners are seeing that, everyone is seeing it. It is showing that these little things that fans can do are really starting to get to him. And that shows that there's obviously things cracking inside him or whatever it is. And that is not a good look. If you're trying to bring people together, you're showing that you're cracking under pressure, right? And that is exactly why the media are hammering him, the fans are hammering him, everyone is hammering him, because he's showing us in his press conferences, in the way he's acting and reacting, that he can't keep it together. And and do you want that as a manager when you're trying to progress as a football club? Do you want someone who is going to show that he can crack in by a fan saying something to him? If he was a bigger person, like players like, do you think Alex Ferguson or Arsene Wenger or Pochettino would have, if people were criticizing them or fans, do you think they would have listened? They would have ignored it and walked on.
Well, it's funny you say that. I did see a clip not so long ago of Pep Guardiola snapping at a fan. Not so long ago.
Okay, we're comparing Pep Guardiola, one of the greatest managers of all time now.
Just saying,
It's
he did
difference.
it.
Yeah,
You just brought up Fergie.
Pep.
What are you talking about? You just brought up Fergie.
Yeah, but them two, look at what they won, Sim. Look at
Yeah,
what they won.
what's that
Look
got to
what
do
they
with
did for their
anything?
clubs.
What's
I would
Jose
have them
Mourinho,
managers- I
Jose
wouldn't mind if
and
them
Conte
managers
had a
did it.
lot of bust ups too.
Yeah.
But like, do you think though, Danny, like, on your point of frustration and us fans being frustrated for multiple reasons, right? And it's kind of, I think we could admit as a fan base, right? We aren't the easiest group of people to please, and football fans aren't. Like, we always kind of saying, back the manager, back the manager, back the manager, and then we'll go, actually, we don't want to waste any more money on you. You're the wrong one, and not that player, not that player. We should spend more sensibly over here. And then we kind of have this high turnover of managers. Like, we should stop sacking them at the first panic. Oh, no, don't sack them. We are quite difficult to please, typically, as fans. But how much of that frustration, I think, well, a lot of that frustration comes from the previous decision-making post-Pochettino before Ange as well, as much as it is Ange today. So the fans were told to be patient with Jose Mourinho. They were told to be patient with Nuno. They were told to be patient with Conte. Then we had the whole to sit around with Stellini and Mason whilst we knew that was like being stuck in some horrible purgatory period, that there was just nothing. You had to literally like hold your eyes open to watch a game and force yourself to get through it for a while. And then we come in and like, right, one more request, fan base. You need to be super patient now for the big project. And we're like, really? We've just been waiting for 5 or 6 years for like this period to end, and now you're saying the rebuild starts now. I think that has led to Ange getting perhaps a bit more direct frustrations put at him from fans in the stadium and he doesn't probably understand that we feel that way because he wasn't around for that period. So he probably is less sympathetic to why he can't be like, why are you guys booing me? I've lost both my centre backs and I lost a game. That's a really difficult situation to be in. And we're like, you don't understand. I've been doing this for 6 years now, Ange, and I'm not going through it again. And I just think there's a mix-up in understanding of where each of us sit between.
I think it's because we've seen evidence based on the performances, including last season, when, for example, the centre backs were there and we were still inconsistent. We were at one point we were like win loss. It's like that for a while, and it's so poor from a club like us. And for me, with Ange, it's just he no matter who is playing, it just seems that the players just switch off. Like, his style of football is not sustainable unless you've got, like I said earlier, you've got a squad of 25 top class players. You give him you put Ange's style of play in a Man City team, then maybe it might work a lot better than it is with the players that we've got. Because let's be honest, players like Johnson, I mean, what team in the top 10 does he get into right now? Like, honestly, he doesn't, right? We've got a lot of average players, and I think that's another issue that we have, is he's trying to play a style of football it's like what I see is we've brought in certain players to play a certain system, yet we're not playing the system to suit those players.
But
You see what
Danny,
I'm saying?
it's been the same thing all along. I agree with you on that sense, and then I agree. Conte, it was exactly the
makes no
same.
sense.
Jose, it was exactly the same. You know, we don't have.
But Ben, do you know what the funny thing is? It's like you're talking about all these managers, right? What's the one common denominator, including Pochettino, that all these managers had to deal with? It's the ownership, right? Because every single time they wanted a certain type of player to fit the way they wanted to play, because in their belief, that's what they need to achieve what they want to achieve, right? And the problem is they never got it. It was always half-half. It was always some signings were by the club, some signings were by the manager, and sometimes they didn't get what they wanted. And it's always been like that. And that is a systemic cultural problem, which is why, in my opinion, no manager is ever going to work here. And it's why I believe Daniel Levy regrets the day that he sacked Pochettino, because I think he's gone so far backwards to where we were under Pochettino that he's been trying to rectify it since then, and he still hasn't been able to do it. He's messed it up so many times. He spent more money than he's ever spent on a lot of dross players as well. And I think what he's trying to emulate is basically what we got under Pochettino, where we're doing above and beyond where we should be.
Yeah,
but the problem is you can't do that unless you've got quality players. But at the time with Poch, he had the core players were in the squad at that time. So we got lucky.
Just bring it back to the original point, which is, we're talking about Ange and the fan pressure and all that kind of stuff. And obviously, I think when it comes to him reacting to things that are said in the crowd, all these kind of things, I think it is a terrible look, and I think it's never going to look good on camera when a fan whose job is whose goal clearly in those moments is to try and rile you up. That's why they're recording these things, and when you're snapping back at them, that's never a good look. I do think there's obviously a human element to it, whereas he's at that moment he doesn't feel like a football manager kind of being shouted at by a fan. He feels like a human who's getting abused by another human being, and he feels like he has a right to respond to that, which I don't disagree with, but I just know when he's the figurehead and he's the one who's kind of the focus, the spotlight is on, you just can't do that. And I think he's, from a PR standpoint, of his own point of view, it just looks awful. It looks like he's getting rattled. I just think it's never a good thing to do. But I think there's the more interesting stuff is, first of all, in his press conference, what he was saying before the Fulham game. I have a lot of sympathy for what he was saying, because I think a lot of people have taken it a bit wrong. But I think there is an element to the fact that he said, I don't, this criticism doesn't affect me. Then he goes on a long rant about the criticism. So I do think I can kind of get
contradicts himself.
People to contradict himself. What I would say is, what he was asked a direct question about, do you feel like the criticism, some of the criticism you get is based off your background, and is it influenced by your background? And he was saying, of course it is, or of course I feel that way, because I'm out of my depth, I've got no plan B, I've got all these different things. And basically he was kind of implying, his background isn't respected, but I would think that's absolutely correct, because he's won leagues in obviously Australia and Japan and Celtic, and no one's going to respect those, even though he did win Australia their first ever international trophy, which is, nothing to be sniffed at. But 100% his background is completely disrespected, and he's obviously had this journey himself where he's built himself a player who had to retire early. He had to take over at all these jobs at quite a few of them, long time ago, at quite a young age for a coach anyway, and got sacked by the under-21s, and he had to rebuild his career, and he's been on this unbelievable journey for him, and the story's incredible. But he comes here and everyone dismisses it, and everyone says, it's a joke, it doesn't really matter here. And look, there is an element of truth to it, because the level he has been coaching at is not the Premier League, and that is the barefaced truth of it. And there's no denying that is a different level to what it is. But it doesn't mean that this guy, doesn't know what he's doing, or he doesn't see everything that we're seeing, and all these different things, and all the things we accuse him of, like a guy who doesn't know what he's doing. And I think that is what maybe he finds ridiculous, and he finds, and especially when he's come to the Premier League last season, the fact is, I know this season's been terrible, but the fact is last season he did take a team that finished 8th and got them to 5th. That is the truth. So he's come all the way from his journey. In his first season in the Premier League, he's taken a team from 8th to 5th, and now all of a sudden, because it's gone wrong this season, he doesn't know what he's doing, and I feel bad for him in that sense. That that's the kind of criticism. Look, if you want to criticize my tactics, if you want to say, if you have a constructive or you have a criticism about certain things, he doesn't mind. But when you're saying things like, I don't know what I'm doing, and that kind of stuff, that's the stuff he finds ridiculous.
What happened to the Kulusevski celebration when he was like that? And he mentioned it in the comments after the game, saying, "Yeah, Ange told us, don't listen to any of the outside noise. We'll stay on our own same path." Like, why isn't he following the same suit?
He doesn't listen to it.
Well, he is listening to it because
He gets told it. He gets told it. It's 2025.
Sim.
People could be, there's everything is everywhere. You can't avoid anything in this day and
can't
age.
avoid mentioning it and taking.
He was asked a direct question.
Yeah, but he doesn't have to talk about it.
Well, why not?
But not just that.
Why not
just
talk
that,
about
right?
it?
What else has he been doing recently? He's starting to use everything as an excuse now. At one point, he was even blaming the fans as a part of the reason why, like saying the fans need to get behind the team.
He wasn't blaming them, but it's true. We do need to get behind the team.
He was.
I don't think he was blaming them. I think, again, people twist things like that. I don't think he was blaming it.
Listen to the comments, right?
I listened. I watched it. I watch every press conference.
Yeah. And Sim, he was basically saying that one of the reasons why we're having these issues is because their players feel not confident because they're not getting the confidence from the fans. So he's basically saying... Yeah, it was basically that, Sim. It was.
It wasn't.
No, yes, it was.
It wasn't. That wasn't what you saying.
It was, Sim. It was. Go back and read the quotes or watch the video.
I watched it. He said that it was tough to play. It was tough for the team to be 2-0 down and for Spurs to come back, especially the atmosphere as it was. He wasn't saying the atmosphere.
No, I'm not talking about the Fulham game.
No, you were talking about the Bournemouth game. He wasn't saying
the other game. It was
or the
before
Arsenal,
that.
whatever it was. He wasn't saying that they played bad because the atmosphere. He said the atmosphere was bad because they played bad. That's what he was saying.
No, there was another thing he said where the players, if you listen to his interview, one of the press conferences, he basically was saying that the players feel the negativity when the stadium is not behind the team, right? It was something on those lines, right? So he's basically saying because the fans are not up for it and are not behind the team in the stadium and it's quiet, that the players feel not confident. Even Tell was saying it the other day, right? So, but the thing is, that's his responsibility, right? To basically get that team playing, to give something to cheer the fans cheer about, right? And he's also blaming the pitch a few times.
That's what he said a number of times.
No,
he said
the
that.
thing is, Tim, but that's his responsibility, right? How can the fans get behind something when they're giving us absolutely nothing to get behind on the pitch? How many times have we been to the stadium this season, right? You yourself, Ben, I'm not sure if you go, Jim, to the stadium.
Yeah, I'm a season ticket holder, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, oh yeah, you do, that's right, yeah. So how many times have we heard how quiet it's been in that stadium, including the South
Yeah,
fans?
but I also, Danny,
silence.
I also think fans fans need to be getting behind the team whether they're playing badly or losing, because also fans can lift their players when they're on the pitch. So I completely disagree with the sentiment that if the players are playing bad, that the fans shouldn't get behind them. I know that's society right now and you can't do anything about it. But look, I want to bring Jim in because he's trying to get a word in for a little bit.
Well, no, just saying, like, and I think if you look at a club like Newcastle, when they were under Ashley, they had a far less prosperous future than us. They still gave a great atmosphere every week. They still took their shirts off and celebrated when they were 4-0 down and somehow got one goal back. And they made it as comfortable as possible as they could for players on an away day in particular. They were the staple, I feel. I do find, going back to the point I think Sim was leaning on there, I do think we've gotten to a point where the frustration is so high with Ange and our fan base, we actively do look for the negative in his comments sometimes. And I do think we go that extra bit further to... I'm used to blindly defending a manager of Tottenham, regardless of who it is. And I was guilty, actually, of not defending Nuno and thinking he was the wrong person from day one. And now he's sat third in the Premier League table with Nottingham Forest. And ironically, he'd probably be top of many Spurs fans' list if he'd never managed us in the first place and they hadn't done the research on his philosophy.
I think there's a manager that suits a certain team and where they are.
There is, yeah. There is, yeah. But it's the whole shiny object syndrome, isn't it? But I do think with Ange, there is definitely a level of... we are so angry and frustrated at what's happened over the last 7 or 8 years in terms of decisions that a lot of the stuff is blowing back onto him. And I would, in his shoes, find it really tough listening... And Sim, you mentioned it, like his history of how he's got where he is. I find in the Premier League, as Premier League fans, we seem to think we have, on average, knowledge above any fan of a different league because we support a team in the best league in the world. Some of the people that have the best knowledge of football in my friendship group actually support the League Two and League One clubs because they follow loads of teams, they love football regardless of the fact they're in that division, and they really understand the game really deeply. Whereas 90% of the football I watch is just Tottenham Hotspur. Like that is what consumes my life, being a Premier League football fan. And I think as Ange, he does know a lot about football. And I do think he was hit straight away with the kind of the mate stuff. Like the memes were out day one from opposition fans. And it just kind of, the instant branding of making him out to be kind of a bit of a chubby village idiot was very easy to latch on to from our own supporters when things started to get difficult. And look, and again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with people who want him gone, but you can't expect fans to be happy when you're 14th. And if they don't believe he's the right guy, that's fine. But I do think we do lack a bit of that tribalistic, blind defensiveness of our club and players and manager that Liverpool, Newcastle, and even the insufferable neighbours down the road show to their lot. And I do think that makes a difference if you do that culture.
No one hates Spurs more than Spurs fans.
But I also think like the whole mate stuff, that's just this day and age, right? I think every manager gets the same kind of treatment in that sense. I mean, Jose Mourinho, as soon as things start going wrong for him, you see all the memes going, "Oh, I'm the special one," and all that kind of stuff.
Fraudiola, they used to call him.
Yeah, well, more Emery. I think Emery gets it.
Emery, good evening. Yeah, you know what I mean? I don't think that's just for Postecoglou. Yeah. I think every manager gets that.
I think every manager gets it, but certain ones get it more than others. And I put Emery and Ange as two examples of people who get it a lot. And I'd put someone like, well, and I know, Dan, you would think, well, they've won everything, that's why. But Pep and Klopp and Jose, I feel like that Jose could fail at 100 more clubs and still get a big job. Like some people can just coast on reputation of the past and their charisma and who they are, and others are just branded an idiot and have to do 10 times more to prove themselves. And you see it in the workplace and all over the world, don't you? Some people just have that charisma that people warm to, and I think Ange came in, he did have a lot of charisma and everyone backed him, but he's just been such an easy target because of his background to brand as.
Jim, I don't agree with that. I don't think it's because of his background. I think that's just an excuse that people use to actually to kind of distract you for what's actually being shown in front of us, right? We have to look at actually the football that's being played on the pitch and the tactics that we've used in games, especially against the smaller clubs. And what's interesting, what I see, is when we actually play well, it's usually when we're playing counter-attacking football, when we hit the teams on the break. That's actually, like again, Man City, we beat them 4-0 at their ground this season. If you look at that game, every single attack was from a break, from a counter-attack, right? Mm-hmm. That was when we were playing. That's when Ange ball essentially kicks in, and you get this free-flowing, like this really beautiful kind of football. This kind of like a tick-attack football that you like to see, right? That's the stereotypical Ange ball. But the problem is that when we try to play with the ball too much, we just don't seem to be effective enough. That's the problem. It's because the players are just not, they don't seem like they're coached. I mean, I haven't seen, let's be honest, if we didn't have the injuries this season, Bergvall and Archie Gray would not have gotten a sniff in this team at all, right? Not the way they have been played, right? And I don't think Bergvall would have been able to grow in the way that he's grown this season without those injuries, right? And go back to Spence. Ange has been ostracizing Spence for how long? And it was only because of the injuries that we actually came into the team, right? And it was because of Spence's ability and his determination to make it is why that he's been able to stay in the team.
So I think that's a bit like that's. I don't completely agree, and especially with Spence. And I'll just say why. And I respect your opinion, by Danny, and let you come back to it. But
of course,
the Spence one, I think there's a big thing around Ange who just didn't want to play him, and we had injuries, and he came in. But I then went down the rabbit hole of like I don't know why, as an adult human being, I waste my time hyper-analysing football things in bed at 10 o'clock when I have a family and a job. But anyway, I did. And Ange actually played Spence in all the pre-season, and then in the first 3 games of the season, he then rested him on the 4th game, brought him back on the 5th game, and he got injured. And then post-injury, he only sat on the bench for 2 games, and he came back into the side again. So I think Ange gave him a new contract. Well, we don't know who gave him a new contract. The club gave him a new contract whilst Ange was manager.
You know, Ange wanted to sell him in the summer. The club also wanted to get rid of him in the summer, but they didn't, right? Because they didn't want to buy another right back and have to worry about. No, that's not
why. Because they didn't stump up the money. He had $8.5 million.
Well, there's that as well, Ben. But it's also because the right backs they were looking at were more money as well. So they couldn't. If they had sold Spence, they needed like you said, they needed the money. They wanted that specific amount of money from Was it
Yeah, but Danny, everyone wanted to sell Spence in the summer. Let's
Yeah,
be
that's
honest.
what I
Old
kinda
fans
Yeah,
want.
but what I'm
Come
saying
on.
is, Ange didn't include him in the Europa League squad. What does that tell you?
Yeah,
It
but the
wasn't part of
Europa
his plans.
the Europa League one, though, we did have the homegrown and club-grown issue where, in hindsight, if he had included Spence, we wouldn't have had Forster, and that injury to Vicario would have left us with Austin. But Austin actually did quite well when he came in, to be fair, and I think that was the wrong decision in hindsight. Spence should have come in, but at that point we couldn't convince a club to take up a €6 million buy option for Spence. Like, he was just seen as this attitude problem wing back who had one good season in the Championship, and that was kind of his thing. And he'd gone to other clubs, and I think Leeds manager called him out for a poor attitude.
Sent him back.
General manager did at the start. He went to League One and couldn't get a start in his 6 months there. And then when he came back, he forced his way back in the team. I think often we have to say well done to the player, because the player has got his head down, worked his arse off, forced the manager to look at him, got back in the team, and the manager did give him a chance. He started him the first 3 games. He got injured and brought him back in the team. And
he didn't start
they gave him a new contract.
He didn't start.
I do find this is one of the things where
he
I
came
feel
on.
a bit. And
He didn't start the first 2 games.
do you not?
No,
Didn't
no.
start.
No,
He didn't start.
he came
but
off the bench
came
for
off
like
the
the last
bench.
minutes of games. I think the only game in that period where he got
He had like a few
significant.
minutes.
No, the only game where he got significant game time was the Manchester United game when he played came on at half time or something.
And the Carabao Cup, he came on at half time.
And the Carabao Cup, yeah.
Well, okay. I'll look up the first.
No, he
3,
didn't start, but he came on. He came off the bench, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, he was playing minutes for Ange, and I do find it's a bit like, if another manager had done that, if Poch had brought Spence through and reached this level, no one expected Spence to hit this level at all. I think we'd be crediting him with being a good coach and getting the best out of a player like we did for Danny Rose.
Yeah,
and
but
helping him
also,
hit a new ceiling.
Yeah, but you also got to look at it, right? In pre-season, he was probably our best player.
Yep.
And all
Yep.
the players that we saw in pre-season that have been our best players have ultimately, at this stage of the season, been the ones that we're looking back on having the best seasons out of anyone in the squad. So
And we were
his
forced to
comeback
use these players.
actually did start at Girona, the back end of the season at Girona
Yes.
last season,
Yeah.
where he did start to have his head screwed on more. He was starting to get more game time. He was starting consistently on the right and the left, and he came back. Pre-season was brilliant, and then he was coming on in the last stage of game, minutes here, minutes there. Saved us in the cup against Coventry, scoring that goal. Coming on in the 45 minutes against Manchester United. Then he got that injury, which is spot on. But then when he came back, we barely saw him. And he was left out of the Europa League squad as well.
Yeah, you have to also take that into account. He left him out the Europa League squad. That basically means you are not important enough to me to put you in that squad. That's what that is saying. There's no other. If he was as important as he should be, or as he is now, he would have included him in that squad. That is the fact.
There was a bit. It was a bit more complex than that in the Europa League squad.
Well,
we did have these massive issues with the homegrown and
yeah,
club-grown
Yeah,
stuff.
but no,
which
but, yeah,
left.
but, no, but the thing is, Jim, you can't say that, because the fact that he is now one of our best performing players, right? And the fact that he's been able to get to this level because of his own ability and his self-belief and determination, right? When he was at the beginning of the season, Ange did not trust him enough. He did not want him. That's why he was excluded from the Europa League squad. If he believed in him in the beginning of the season, he would have been in that squad. The only reason Spence came into it is because of the injury issue. That is it.
It was
Because
as well
Austin started
because
playing well. Because Austin proved he can do the job.
but that
The
was partly because
decision-
Austin proved. Yeah.
The decision for the Europa League squad was as simple as, I'm either taking 3 goalkeepers into Europa League, which I want to use. I'm going to leave Alfie Whiteman in. I know he was part of the squad, but I'm going to leave him out of it because he was never planning to use him. So the decision was
because
either
he was
3
club-grown.
Yeah, correct. So the decision you had to take him 100%. So the decision was either take 3 goalkeepers in Brandon Austin, Fraser Forster, and Vicario, or take 3 fullbacks for 2 positions in Destiny Udogie, Pedro Porro, and who was the other one? Archie Gray, and or 4 in Jed Spence. And he chose 3 fullbacks over 3. He chose 3 goalkeepers over 3 fullbacks. And at the time, I think most of us were saying it was a terrible decision.
We were, but equally, Vicario did get a long-term injury, and we were in a position where if we had brought only 2 goalkeepers, we could have been in a situation where a centre-back or a right-back is playing in goal in the
Not
Europa
really,
League.
because Alfie Whiteman was still there.
I guess Alfie Whiteman was there. Or Alfie Whiteman would be our goalkeeper, basically, someone who's never played a professional game, right?
Well, that's if Brandon Austin got injured, yeah.
Yeah. So it was a thing of, it wasn't like a simple, I'm leaving him out because I think he's rubbish. I think it was a bit of both of prioritization. Do I want to risk going into a competition where if I lose 2 goalkeepers to injury, I'm in a very bad position? Or do I just go with that for the first half of the season, first half of the Europa League campaign and bring Jed Spence?
And also, you're playing the squad into danger as well with the fullback situation, because you know how much strain the fullbacks take in our squad. Destiny Udogie, every time we tried to rest him, had to come on because of injury. Pedro Porro is being completely overplayed. Archie Gray had to fill in there a number of times. So we needed that fullback, and Spence was sitting right there. I mean, it just didn't make sense to me.
Jim,
again, the only thing that does make sense, before you say anything, the only thing that does make sense is that he wasn't part of his plans. There's no other reason why you don't include him in the squad.
Jim, I want to ask you in terms of, we're talking about, Danny brought up the point before about players being behind Ange and stuff like that. Tell, obviously, after the game, jumping into the crowd, talking to the fans, saying we need to stick together.
We're at 3:30. Do we not need to...
How much longer you have, Jim?
I've got another 5 minutes, probably. I need to jump. Yeah.
Go on, John. Should we move on to the other topic then?
Or 5 minutes? There's no point. Just ask your question.
Well, I can. How long do you need?
Ask your question.
No, I was going to say, the Tell thing that happened after the game. Saying we need to stick together. We need to all that kind of stuff. And also after in that clip we were talking about with Ange, Tell was the one, kind of standing up for Ange as well, telling the fan to respect and all that kind of thing. What do you think that says about, where some of the players' heads are at when it comes to that kind of thing? Because, if the players were all checked out, or some of the players, especially a lone player who's potentially only here for 6 months, would they feel the need to kind of do that and kind of try and defend what they're saying if they didn't believe in it?
No, absolutely. Like, when the dressing room has lost interest, it starts with a tweet from Ali Gold that says players are getting frustrated about the training methods of X player. You're like, oh no, here we go again. And they start downing tools. And that's happened endless times. I feel like the majority of the squad are still fully behind him and fighting for him. And I particularly the younger players like Tell, Berryval, Gray. Spence loves him as well, regardless of our previous topic. Vicario loves him. The players he brought in obviously really rate him. Interestingly, he seems to be pushing Johnson to one side now a bit, taking him off at half time and stuff. But anyway, I think that to me shows that the players are definitely fully fighting for him, the ones he's brought in. I've never seen a unison with results this tough where Spurs players have actually carried on fighting for their manager, but it seems to have gotten to a point where Ange has kind of gotten with a bit of rift of the fans we've already discussed, but the players have sided with him. They've said, no, we're on this guy's side. You lot need to back off. You aren't helping. You are making it more difficult for him. And they're kind of going on his side and literally confronting the fans in the stadium to make that point and show that they're on the manager's side. So, look, there has to be something right behind the scenes for the players still to believe in it. I can't believe these professionals who have played for multiple good managers would still be fighting for him if they thought he was, and they're comparing him to other managers if they thought there was no hope in this project. But there is definitely, I think, an issue with, like we said earlier, the ones who are not part of his plans, have a year or two left on their contract, and they're clearly going to be sold. Those ones seem to have kind of down tools a bit and be doing the whole kind of frustrating thing of just not fighting.
Do you know why this happens with every single manager we've seen for the last 5 to 10 years, right? And this is, I'm going to go to a quote that Harry Kane used, and I'm going to paraphrase because I can't remember the exact quote, but essentially when he went to Bayern Munich, he basically was saying that when you go to Bayern Munich, you're expected to win every single game, right? So the mentality and the culture within the club is, if you do not win, it's a massive problem. And he even said, at Spurs, it doesn't matter if you didn't win a game, right? That to me is why we have this massive problem where players in this football club have way too much power, and when they just don't like something, they down tool, they don't give their effort, they don't play for the badge, and then we end up going through this cycle that we go through with every single manager that we've had in the last 10 years. And that is a cultural problem because of the way that the players are given too much power. I mean, the Levy basically sits in the canteen with them, having breakfast with them like he's their mates. I mean, this is their boss. He shouldn't be pally with all of the footballers, calling them by their first names. Like this is why our players don't have. There's no accountability on the players when they don't turn up, because they're still going to get paid at the end of the day, and that's a massive problem. Which is why we don't have this culture at this club of we need to try and win every game. Which is why we have these games where at times, the only time I saw it was under Pochettino, when he tried to instill this kind of winning culture at this football club. But he was just unlucky that he never had the squad depth in order to achieve what he should have achieved at this club, which was to win the big titles.
Yeah, it always comes back to that Danny Rose moment from the documentary when he wasn't happy with what Jose said, and he's like, all right, I'm going to Daniel. I mean, that should never happen. It should be the buck should always stop with the manager, and he should be the boss, and the chairman should stay out of these kind of things.